An update on that dumbass named Connor Jones. Bubba Wallace gets some changes for 2025, and we got another update on the NASCAR lawsuit. Yo, what's good everyone? My name is Jet. Welcome back to an episode of Inside Alliance. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Let's first start off with Connor Jones. This dumbass here, what he did at Saturday's NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Homestead Miami Speedway, when out of a fury of rage, decided to wreck Matt Mills and send him into the outside wall. Now, Matt Mills, we know the situation. His truck caught on fire. He was able to get out under his own power, but had to stay for a couple nights at a local hospital in the Homestead Miami area due to smoke inhalation from the fire. Well, NASCAR has laid down the law on Connor Jones. He has been suspended from this weekend's NASCAR Truck Series race at Martinsville. He will be replaced by Johnny Sauter in the 66 truck because of his actions. He will return back, I believe, for Phoenix for the season finale. This is a great decision by NASCAR. They have been very consistent. Say what you want about NASCAR, but they have been very consistent on premeditated attempts. He clearly didn't hide it if you heard his radio rant after that incident. So clearly we all knew that this was a premeditated move by Jones's part. So very glad that NASCAR decided to make this decision. There could have been, I would honestly been okay if it was for this weekend at Martinsville and also next weekend at Phoenix. Was fine with either way. But yeah, happy that NASCAR has been consistent with this, and hopefully this will lead into stricter officiating by NASCAR. I know NASCAR officiating has taken a beating for how awful they have been, but they seriously need to get a wraparound with the Truck Series in this situation. Even though the Truck Series has gotten a lot better this year than it was in years past, still, there is an issue. We have so many paid drivers, especially in the Truck Series, that think they can do whatever they want and have no form of consequence. They think nothing will happen. Oh, I can do whatever I want. Oh, I'm mad. I want to throw a hissy fit. I want to cry like a whiny little baby and wreck someone and send them to the hospital. I can do that. Nothing will happen to me because I got my daddy's rich paycheck in my wallet. So yeah, glad that NASCAR is making this decision. Hopefully Jones can learn from this and not do something like that again, because he does have a history of racing with his head up his ass. Next up, we're going to talk about is Bubba Wallace. Now, Bubba Wallace has had his crew chief, Booty Barker, since 2021, since the beginning of 2311 racing. Well, that partnership will come to an end following the championship race at Phoenix in 2 weeks' time, as it was announced that 2311 racing will make a personnel change. Bubba Wallace will get a new crew chief, Charles Denique, sorry if I mispronounced that name, who is currently the crew chief for Christian Eckes and the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, and the 19 truck will be Bubba Wallace's new crew chief for 2025. Booty Barker will transition to a more team management type of role that will go over to strategize the cars and prepare for the races, basically throughout the entirety of the 2311 race team at airspeed at their facility. I think this could be a good move for someone like Booty Barker. The journey he has been, a journeyman that's been with teams like Germain Racing, Michael Waltrip Racing during their early years, to finally be able to get that win at Talladega in 2021 and another win 2 years ago at Kansas in the fall. For him to be able to find victory lane after he's been in the garage for so long, it was really cool to see. And I do think this could be a positive change, a breath of fresh air in a sense. We have seen crew chief decisions make way for greater ventures. I'm not saying they're on the same level. I'm just giving examples. Like you look at William Byron. He had Darian Grubb, Chad Knaus, and then he was finally paired up with Rudy Fugle in 2021. And you saw how good that 24 team has been since that change. Blake Harris, that 48 team, I would argue that Alex Bowman has gotten better with Blake Harris as his crew chief. Who knows, the same thing could happen with Bubba Wallace in 2025. Bubba Wallace has been driving a lot better this year. The team hasn't been as consistent still, but this has been Bubba's best year, and hopefully in 2025 they can continue going on up and up and be alongside with his teammate Tyler Reddick, who is currently competing for a championship. And finally, lawsuit time. Yes, let's talk about an update on the NASCAR lawsuit with 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. Now, NASCAR did give a response to basically block the 2311 and Front Row's case from being pushed forward to a court through the preliminary injunction. NASCAR tried to block that. Well, 2311 and Front Row have offered a response to that. As always, we're going to go over everything. Now, this document, this reply, is a lot shorter. It's like maybe 7 pages of actual things that we're going to talk about. So it's a lot shorter, but regardless, let's go over everything. Start off with a very damning punchline to open up their response by saying, quote, Defendants, that being NASCAR, do not dispute that the NASCAR Cup Series is the only premier stock car racing series in which plaintiffs can race. This means they have monopoly power. Defendants do not dispute that they use restrictive covenants, denying competitors access to racetracks and racing teams, and their economics has not offered any pro-competitive justification for such restrictions or for NASCAR's acquisitions of racetracks and a competitor. This means that defendants have used exclusionary acts, not legitimate competition, to maintain their monopoly. And defendants do not dispute that the charter agreement requires plaintiffs to agree to a release of claims in order to be able to complete. So that last line is pretty self-explanatory, but basically what the plaintiffs, 2311 Front Row, are saying that NASCAR has not disputed basically that they are a monopoly to stock car racing. Now, one thing that NASCAR tried to argue to the court or to the judge to explain why they should not go through with this is that the teams can compete as open teams. That's something that NASCAR has said many times throughout this lawsuit, is that, hey, listen, they can still compete as open teams. However, the plaintiffs are saying that, yeah, we can compete as open teams, but it will cause irreparable harm. Defendants argue that plaintiffs can compete as open teams to avoid irreparable injury, but what defendants do not tell the court is that they mandate the same release of claims as the price for competing open. Unless a preliminary injunction is granted, plaintiffs will suffer the indisputable irreparable harm of being unable to compete without risking forfeiting their antitrust claims. Now that's something that's interesting, and I had no idea that that was in any of the agreements with NASCAR, is that it doesn't matter if you're chartered or open. If you are in NASCAR, if you want to compete in NASCAR in any way, shape, or form, you must sign a release that says you cannot sue us, even if you're an open team, which I didn't think that was even part of the lawsuit or part of the agreement. I thought if you're an open team, you're kind of just showing up. You can do whatever you want, really. So for that to also, for open teams, that they also have to sign a clause that says, hey, you can't sue us for any form of antitrust claims or anything like that. Again, that's very shady on NASCAR's part, that even if you're chartered or not, does not matter. If you are a team trying to race in NASCAR, hey, come here, you got to sign this, all right? You cannot sue us for anything like that. Or you're only showing up for one race, don't matter. You can't sue us for nothing like that. So, and this is a great argument by the plaintiff side, from 2311 Front Row side, by saying that, hey, listen, this has to go through, because regardless, if this does not go through, regardless, we're screwed, because if we're open team, yeah, we can still race, but we still won't be able to sue them, and that's not fair. That is not right. To have the teams basically in a position where they're kind of have their hands tied behind their backs and they cannot do a damn thing about it. If they even want to compete in NASCAR as an open team, too bad, you can't sue us. That's a great argument by the plaintiff side. That's something you cannot deny, that the fact that the open teams can't, are forced to sign or antitrust release, or they have to sign something that says that they can't sue NASCAR. Again, that's not right. Now, the only way to not have to deal with that irreparable harm from the plaintiff side, from the team standpoint, is that they have to be included in the 2025 charter agreement without having to also have that antitrust release clause on their heads. Basically, the only way we can go through with this is that we are part of the charter agreement, but don't have to be part of that, hey, you can't sue NASCAR for antitrust claims clause that is in the 2025 charter agreement. That's the only way, according to the teams, that they can go through with this without any form of irreparable harm. Now, a couple of other things that they mention in this document is that they mention about the likelihood of success for any other racing series, professional stock car racing series outside of NASCAR. The document mentions how that NASCAR does not refute the plaintiff's claims that NASCAR basically is a monopoly, kind of restating the points that I mentioned at the beginning of this lawsuit update portion of the video. They brought up the SRX, the Superstar Racing Experience, and how they had to differentiate their format because of NASCAR's exclusionary act. And they also mentioned the 2016 charter agreement. There's a portion in there that I'm assuming it's very important because it's blacked out. Like, you cannot see it. It's one of the things that 2311 Front Row, the teams and the plaintiffs and the defendants have agreed to, that, okay, there's some things that have to be kept behind closed doors, so they black it out. And apparently, I guess, something in that 2016 charter agreement is so important that they have to black out that part also. Again, if you want to read the full document for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description down below. And they also mentioned how, like, this does not apply to the antitrust claims that have been asserted against NASCAR and the monopolization that the plaintiffs saying began after 2016. I mentioned about that clause, apparently, that even if you're an open team, you still cannot sue NASCAR for any form of antitrust case. They mentioned how that is extremely unfair for their part, because that means that if they compete as an open team, if they're forced to compete as an open team, and the judge does not accept this preliminary injunction, they're forced to compete as an open team. We already know how the story goes, is that they receive a lot less in purse. They bring in a lot less money in, which also affects drivers that want to join 23XI Racing in the future, because, I mean, no driver is going to feel comfortable joining an open team compared to a charter team. Same thing with sponsorships. You look at Live Fast Motorsports, when they were a charter team, guarantee you're going to be in the show. They had a lot more sponsorships compared to nowadays, where even if they're at Daytona or Talladega, they're lucky to get a sponsor just because they are not chartered. Now, they did bring up an example of one race team that did field an unchartered, an open car for the full season. And that was referencing Ryan Preece in 2021 for JTG Daugherty Racing, who I believe sold their charter to, I think, Spire Motorsports at the end of the 2020 campaign. That, of course, they only did that for one season and closed up shop at the end of 2021 by also releasing Ryan Preece. And they end that portion by saying that competing as an open team would eventually end in 23XI Racing and Front Row Racing basically shutting down for good. Let's be honest, more or less it's going to be Front Row, because 23XI, they got Michael Jordan. That guy has money. He can probably handle it at least a lot longer than a Front Row Motorsports. But if this does continue for, let's say, 7 years, 23XI and Front Row compete as open teams, I don't know, who knows? Maybe they may not be, hypothetically, they may not be here by the end of that 7-year charter agreement. And finally, they ended by saying, quote, "An injunction will not harm defendants. It will simply require defendants to enter into the status quo 2025 charter agreements offered to plaintiffs 2 weeks before litigation, absent the ability to enforce the release. By contrast, if the injunction is not granted, plaintiffs will either have to forego competing or risk losing their antitrust rights." So overall, the main premise of this response by saying that, hey, listen, there are also some other parts that I missed by saying that, listen, we gave NASCAR plenty of time to be able to respond to this because NASCAR claimed that, hey, we were caught off guard by this. We didn't know. Where the plaintiffs are saying, no, we gave you a heads up back on, I think, on October 9th, which was about 3 weeks ago, about this lawsuit that was happening. So they're saying, hey, we gave you plenty of time to do this. On top of that, again, according to the plaintiffs, that NASCAR didn't do a good job to defend themselves by saying that, hey, we are not a monopoly. According to the plaintiffs, NASCAR said that they did not dispute that. They didn't dispute by saying they are a monopoly. So again, the only way that we really get to see the good juicy stuff about this lawsuit is if the judge accepts this preliminary injunction. And at the end of the day, I think we will be getting a notice or some type of update about this either on Friday, but then I've also heard things about maybe Monday. It's been pushed back to Monday when we get an update on this lawsuit. At the end of the day, it's simple as this. If the judge accepts this, okay, then we have something. 23XI and Front Row, they were technically in. But if they don't, if the judge denies it, where does 23XI and Front Row go from here? Because they're basically screwed. I mean, I don't know the legal process. I don't know if they can file an appeal maybe, or I don't know what they could do, honestly. But if the judge denies this preliminary injunction, is this really the end for at least Front Row? I don't know about 23XI, but can they go 7 years as an open car, as an open team? We still don't know about what the status is about Front Row 23XI's expansion, because remember, each of them have acquired a charter for 2025. How does that play out? An interesting point that they made is that the injunction will not harm the defendants. And that is true because NASCAR at the moment has 36 charters. They were going to be prepared for 36 charters for 2025. So if the judge does accept this, then nothing really happens to NASCAR. Nothing would really change. I mean, they've spent the last 8 or so years already with 36 charters. So for 2025 and onwards, if they were to remain at 36 charters, nothing would really change. So yes, they are right by saying that, hey, listen, if you accept this preliminary injunction, nothing's going to happen to NASCAR. It's not like this only helps us and hurts them. No, this will help us and nothing happens to NASCAR. They are still fine. They're still going to be making bank, by the way, but nothing happens to NASCAR. So that point is very important. I feel like it's just going to be up to the judge to determine whether or not that what 2311 Front Row have a legitimate case. I do think personally that they have a case. They have a really, really good argument. The monopoly part, it is interesting because NASCAR, with you look at ARCA, you look at ISC. NASCAR has done things in the past that, from the outside perspective, you look at it and think, okay, yeah, this does look like NASCAR trying to get a hold on everything from tracks to lower division racing series to make sure that they're not able to rise up, have them be a part of under our umbrella. Yes, NASCAR has done things that show that, hey, from the outside perspective, this does look like some shady shit. It looks like something that, okay, this could be viewed as a monopoly. It could be viewed as something that needs a case on, needs something that deserves to be worth fighting against. So yeah, I'm very curious to see how this develops, but it's all going to ride on what happens next week, I believe, on whether or not the judge accepts this preliminary injunction. If it goes through, then we got a case. If not, then the future of 2311 and Front Row looks very bleak.
You can't tell me now about time. Do you know how many lines I done put down, vibes I done sent out? But we in here to dig. I'll up the market till they come red carpet the kids. Success still the target. Soon I'll be crossing that bridge, but can't bring everybody with me. Family only. I got some people think I owe a favor, barely know me. That's why my focus on the road. It's all I know. I see them sticking close to play the wall.